You can see it clearly in your head, not just bits of it, but the whole structure, how it fits together, how one part affects another, how the whole thing moves. But the moment you try to explain it out loud, it starts to collapse. The words come out in pieces. The other person starts drifting. And now you're not just trying to explain what you see, you're trying to hold on to it while feeling the connection break. And that is where the real problem begins. This is not happening because you do not understand what you are talking about. In many cases, the opposite is true. You understand it too well to reduce it quickly. What feels simple inside your own mind may already exist there as a full pattern, not a neat sentence-by-sentence explanation. So, when you try to force that whole structure through a narrow verbal channel in real time, it can make you look less clear than you actually are. The problem is not lack of intelligence. The problem is that internal clarity and external expression do not run on the same format. Inside your head, you may not be thinking in a straight line at all. You may be seeing relationships, layers, movement, and cause and effect all at once. That works well internally because your mind can hold the structure as a whole. But speech does not work like that. Speech is linear. It has to come out one piece at a time in an order the other person can follow. That means you are not just expressing the idea. You are compressing a full internal model into a sequence. And the clearer the structure is in your mind, the harder that compression can become. A big part of the problem is that many conversations do not stay open long enough for that compression to happen properly. A lot of people seem to think in 2 or 3 sentence concepts. If the point is not clear to them within that small window, the disconnect begins. Their attention shifts, the thread starts to drop, and now you can feel yourself rushing to compress something that was never small to begin with. You could think of it like this. For some people, conversation is like surfing a wave. It stays near the surface, keeps moving, and does not go deep for long. For others, conversation is more like diving beneath the wave, going down into the structure underneath it. When those two styles meet, cognitive mismatch can show up fast. That mismatch matters more than many logical minds realize. If you rarely meet people who naturally think in full structures, then repeated moments of disconnect can start stacking up in memory. Over time, it stops feeling like a simple communication issue and starts feeling like something is wrong with you, or like there is no real way to get across what you actually mean. And if you have had enough negative social experiences, the social interaction itself may already carry charge before you even begin explaining. In that case, the trigger is not only the other person drifting halfway through. Sometimes the system is already bracing from the start. So the moment you notice the other person looking confused, losing interest, interrupting, or drifting, the situation changes. It is no longer only about getting the structure across. Now your system is also reacting to the disconnection itself. That moment can hit old patterns of being misunderstood, dismissed, talked over, or treated like what you see does not matter. Once that charge comes online, your attention is split. Part of you is still trying to explain, while another part is already reacting to what the moment seems to mean. That is why your mind can suddenly seem to go blank right when you need it most. The structure itself has not vanished. Your access to it has been disrupted. Once the emotional reaction kicks in, the system starts reallocating resources. Instead of calmly translating what you already understand, you are now also managing tension, monitoring the other person, and reacting to what the interaction seems to say about you. The more personal the disconnection feels, the harder it becomes to organize the structure and deliver it cleanly. So what looks like losing your train of thought is often interference, not absence of understanding. At that point, most logical minds do what they do best. They try to understand it better. They analyze the reaction, map the pattern, and figure out exactly why it keeps happening. And that makes sense, because if you are built to solve problems through understanding, then understanding feels like the obvious path to control. But this is where many people get trapped. They can become incredibly good at explaining their own triggers without becoming any better at stopping those triggers from interfering in the moment. That leads to another paradox. The more clearly you understand what is happening, the more frustrating it becomes when that understanding still does not change the outcome. You can know exactly why you react, exactly where the pattern came from, and exactly what the trigger is touching, and still feel your system get pulled off course in real time. So, insight is useful, but it is not the same as control. Knowing the mechanism is not the same as being free of its effects. So if this keeps happening to you, the issue is probably not that you are bad at explaining things. It is more likely that two different forces are colliding at the same time. One is the natural difficulty of compressing a whole internal structure into linear speech. The other is the emotional charge that gets activated the moment that translation starts to break down socially, or in some cases, the charge that is already there before the interaction even begins. And once those two combine, understanding alone will only take you so far, because the real shift does not happen when you can describe the trigger better. It happens when the trigger stops interfering with your ability to think, speak, and stay connected in the moment. If this pattern shows up for you, write in the comments where the disconnect usually begins. Does it happen when you cannot compress your point fast enough, when the other person starts drifting, or before the conversation even gets going? I read the comments and they help me see which part of this pattern is hitting hardest for people. If you have lived this pattern for years, it is easy to assume the answer is to keep improving your explanations, keep refining your thinking, or keep understanding yourself more deeply. But if emotional triggers are interfering with access to what you already know, then insight on its own will not solve the real problem. The real problem is not that the structure is missing. It is that the structure becomes harder to access and express once the trigger is active. And that is why understanding your triggers and actually becoming free of their interference are two very different things. If you want a deeper explanation of why understanding your emotional triggers does not automatically give you control over them, there's a link to a free video in the description box below. And if you want to explore another paradox here on YouTube first, check out the video up here.